Audiobook Club with Steve Phillips and Matthew Layton.
On this episode of Audiobook Club, External, Night, Argentina. A deserted country road in the middle of nowhere.
Around halfway into our journey, between 8 and 9 p.m, the fixer who was riding with our police escort came over the walkie-talkie and told the convoy to halt. We were now on the outskirts of the small town of Toluin, and the police wanted to check it out before we continued on. We sat in the darkness in silence. A few minutes later, the police car returned, and the fixer's voice once more came over the radio. She did her very best to speak calmly and factually, but over the airwaves, her fear was palpable. Basically, the main street that we'd be using to go through Toluin was now lined with locals. They were waiting on either side with piles of rocks and stones at their feet. Everyone knew our options were zero. We couldn't go back towards Ushuaia, nor were there any turnoffs on the road. And out here in the middle of Buttfuck County, we'd now learned that nobody was coming to help. The only option was to run the gauntlet.
Audiobook Club with Steve Phillips and Matthew Layton.
Hello and welcome to Audiobook Club, the greatest audiobook review and recommendation podcast in the world. This week we're casting an ear over Mr. Wilman's motoring adventure, Top Gear Grand Tour, Clarkson and Me. This is by Andy Wilman, narrated by the author. Came out 6th of November. 11 hours and 4 minutes from Penguin Audio. Matt, you wanted to notes from the margin before we dive into this book, didn't you?
Yeah, before we get stuck into this, Steve, obviously 2 weeks ago, somehow, we are the only podcast in the world that, while listening to Kathy Burke's audiobook, managed to come across the topic of fagging at British public schools.
Yes.
The interesting thing is, I realised where I got most of my information about fagging from, and that was Roald Dahl's book, Boy. Did you ever read that?
I've not read that, no.
Okay, so the thing is, and in a very happy happenstance, Jeremy Clarkson and our author this week, Andy Wilman, both went to Repton School, which is where Roald Dahl actually did his fagging 40 years earlier. So I went and had a little rummage. In the book Boy, I downloaded the audiobook of Boy. I haven't listened to any Roald Dahl on audiobook. It's quite nice.
We've not done Roald Dahl, have we?
No, we
No.
haven't had the excuse. And I think Boy was a really big deal for my brother. I think he really loved that book because he went to boarding school as well. But yeah, here is, further to the bit where we on our Kathy Burke show talked about arcane rituals at British public schools. This is the original source material about fagging as written by Roald Dahl.
The rules and rituals of fagging at Repton were so complicated that I could fill a whole book with them. A housebozer, for example, could make any fag in the house do his bidding. He could stand anywhere he wanted to in the building, in the corridor, in the changing room, in the yard, and yell, "Fag!" at the top of his voice, and every fag in the place would have to drop what he was doing and run flat out to the source of the noise. There was always a mad stampede when the call of "fag" echoed through the house, because the last boy to arrive would invariably be chosen for whatever menial or unpleasant task the bozer had in mind. During my first term, I was in the changing room one day just before lunch, scraping the mud from the soles of my study holder's football boots, when I heard the famous shout of "fag" far away at the other end of the house. I dropped everything and ran. But I got there last, and the bozer who had done the shouting, a massive athlete called Wilberforce, said, "Dahl, come here." The other fags melted away with the speed of light, and I crept forward to receive my orders. "Go and heat my seat in the bogs," Wilberforce said. I want it warm. I hadn't the faintest idea what any of this meant, but I already knew better than to ask questions of a bozer. I hurried away and found a fellow fag who told me the meaning of this curious order. It meant that the bozer wished to use the lavatory, but that he wanted the seat warmed for him before he sat down. The 6 house lavatories, none with doors, were situated in an unheated outhouse, and on a cold day in winter you could get frostbite out there if you stayed too long. This particular day was icy cold, and I went out through the snow into the outhouse and entered number 1 lavatory, which I knew was reserved for bozers only. I wiped the frost off the seat with my handkerchief, then I lowered my trousers and sat down.
And that's how the empire was made.
Wow. Why did you have to, if you're just warming the seat, why would you have to lower your trousers? Couldn't you just sit on there with your shorts on?
I suppose you could, but he wanted it really warm, didn't he?
Yeah.
That's amazing. That piece of text, that is my primary reference to the subject of fagging, which I was able to retrieve instantly.
Well done.
2 weeks ago. But yeah, I haven't listened to that, or I probably read it 38, 40 years ago. So,
wow, some nice trip down memory lane there for you. Did you have to warm up anyone's seat at all back in your days?
No, I managed to get away without doing that. Are you jealous of the private school education and my entitlement?
Well, given the task that was given, it's a real eye opener. Clearly,
if you do it wrong, yeah.
Well, if you do it wrong, yeah, it really would do. But did you have? We talked about this, but did you ever have this stuff? Were you a fag?
No, I wasn't. So I went to a day school. My brother went to boarding school. I think it was dead by then. In Mr. Wilman's book, he declares that the really harsh personal stuff like warming the bog seat, the personal fagging, had been outlawed by the time he got there. And even if a prefect wanted to send the kids, or a bozer wanted to send the kids to the shop to buy cigarettes, which was one of those, there was a tax, and basically you get 2 fags for running down the shops and buying.
Oh, okay.
But you see, it's how the empire was built.
Yes.
It's like we need people who can take orders and humiliation, and then 5 years later they have to dole it out again in a vengeful way, and that, my friend, is why all the maps were red.
Yes, of course, absolutely right. So, is this what you would like to see come back?
No, this is not. No, I'm just bringing an artifact to the table, Steve.
Just holding a mirror up.
It's not a manifesto, my friend.
Well, the way things are going, everyone's setting up a political party these days, aren't they? For various, driven by various factors. Just thought we might have to. Should I be putting up a flag? Based on one of your designs. I don't know, like someone sitting on a toilet seat or something. I don't know.
No.
Okay.
Let's go back to safer ground, shall we?
Okay. Let's get into our cars and drive, shall we?
Yes, indeed.
Okay. Right. So we have a 3-step process, dear listener, which is basically the author. We talk about Andy Wilman for a short period. Then we talk about the text of the book, and then we talk about the audiobook production. Now, was it any better than the printed version? What does it bring to the party being an audiobook over the printed version? Now, when we recommended this book to read, this is basically my Christmas gift to you, Max. I know this is really in your wheelhouse, quite literally.
Yeah.
You love your cars, you love your F1. This would really kind of fall into your lap. Things like the Top Gear, the Grand Tour was a massive hit, both of them around the world, controversial as well. So lots to talk about here. What are your first thoughts on the book?
On the subject matter. So I was a little worried, as you know, about this could become all too self-indulgent. I've always loved cars. I remember that when I was in my cot, remembering that I couldn't see too well at that point, I could tell which car was driving into the street where we lived by the sound of it. And I would tell my mother, that's Daddy. My dad had an amazing job where the company he was MD of had I think a 4-figure number of fleet vehicles. So as a kid, every other weekend or so, because Vauxhall or Ford wanted my dad to buy 300 Sierras, they would send something exciting for him to drive, and he used to love it, and I caught the bug off him. And then one of my earliest memories is when I was 4 years old and I was playing with a little it was like a lorry, you know, those toy lorries that you get that have the car carrier bit on them. So they're car carriers, aren't they? Yeah. So I had 5 or 6 different cars on the back of it. I said, Dad, when I grow up, I really want to be a racing driver. And my dad said to me, son, I'm afraid that's probably not going to be possible because of your eyesight. And that's one of the most traumatic events of my life. So as much as I love cars, car culture, and people talking about cars, and you know, it's not from a driving perspective, it's from the colour, the shape, what the brands mean. I'm not an expert on engines, but again, that was very much aligned with what Top Gear was when I was a kid. It was good enough for me. They said it was old and boring, but I was excited when I found out there was an XR4i. I've always loved it. And yeah, as you say, later on, about 2010, so when Top Gear was about halfway through that incarnation, I got the job at Radio Silverstone. They said to me, do you know anything about Formula One? I went, not really, but if you're going to pay me to choose the music...
There we go. Yeah.
I'll blooming well learn. And again, that did nothing to help. 5 Formula One world champions over the 5 years that I did it. Very proud to have got those interviews from nowhere. But yeah, so I'm worried that I'm going to be self-indulgent on this. Also, there's a bit here, Steve, where as somebody who actually by trade I would consider myself to be a radio producer, and I think there's a lot of you that is too, i.e. you help other people to sound good, or in the case of Andy Wilman, whose job it is as a producer. In fact, it was my mate Phil's neighbour Alan. His wife worked at the BBC. She was a radio producer. He was an electrician. He went, I just don't know what she's on about. I asked her what she does for a job, and she can't tell me. I said, it's very simple, Alan. I'm a radio producer too by trade, and love helping to organise stuff. Without a producer, a radio presenter is just a in a box.
Right, wasn't expecting that.
We're the people who connect them to the outside world, who do the admin, who come up with the ideas and the structure, make sure that everything gets delivered. Radio, there isn't really a budget to run, but clearly in the course of this book, we're, you know, with the £5 million tent for the Grand Tour, you know, organising stuff like that. Look, anything else? We've seen Mr. Wilman doing the rounds. You saw him on Chris Evans, was it?
He's been everywhere, Andy Wilman. He's been on Virgin, with Chris Evans. He's been on Radio X with Chris Moyles. He's been on...
I saw the Moyles one.
He's been on a podcast which I might have mentioned before, the TV Insiders podcast. That's Peter Fincham and Jimmy Mulville, to get a different angle on his book, because
Jimmy Mulville
runs Hat Trick Productions, and Peter Fincham was the controller of BBC One, and they were on the inside of all this at the time, actually, and they had some interesting anecdotes actually of when, for example, when Jeremy Clarkson left Top Gear with everything that happened there, and he was due to do Have I Got News for You the same week, and he was being asked by the press, is he cancelling? He's like, no, he's still going to do it. And there's an interesting anecdote there, but yeah, go listen to that podcast. Really interesting.
Okay, but what I'd like to do is I saw the Chris Evans and Chris Moyles ones, which are, targeted square bang precisely at us, but because they're for a mainstream audience, what they have done is talk about the big stories, like the auditions of how all the presenters got their job, happens to be by accident, the nearly getting killed in America. So what I'd like to do, Steve, if it's all right, is talk about my impressions of Mr. Wilman himself from his biography, and perhaps with a little dash, a little less car, a little bit more us as media professionals and that kind of thing, and get your opinion on that kind of stuff as well. Did you watch Top Gear? Was it a Sunday night fixture for you?
Yeah, completely. I mean, I used to watch it. To be fair, I used to watch it. I really got into it when I was a kid, watching old Top Gear, you know, the sort of the magazine format, the sort of the three presenters doing three different reports on three different cars a week, you know, William Woolard and all the rest of it.
That's some consumer advice.
Yeah, the consumer
that's
advice
all we
show.
knew.
But it was really...
It's all we knew, Stephen. We were grateful
well, I know,
for
but it really became an appointment to watch viewing when Jeremy Clarkson started on there. We all like, oh, can't wait for Jeremy's report, can't wait. And Quentin Wilson, bless him, of course, who recently left us. Those two were really the reasons why we wanted to watch Top Gear, just because they were both very funny, and that's something that Top Gear hadn't had. And then, you know, I think Jeremy Clarkson left for a little while, and then Top Gear needed to recharge its batteries, so to speak, and they came back with, you know, completely changing the format. So since I was a kid, pretty much, yeah.
Okay, so but the Clarkson iteration that went from 2002 to 2015, it was getting your pencil case ready for school, even though you and I were in our mid-30s by that point, I think. But it was just. It was just that was what Sunday nights were, and you looked forward to it, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, and so did 350 million people around the world by the end of it, on a weekly basis.
Yep.
But yeah, it's should we go into the book?
Yes, let's.
And the author first.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, talk us some Wilman.
All right, Andrew Neville Wilman, born 16th. You don't get many Nevilles anymore, do you?
You don't know. Need more.
But born 16th of August 1962, is an English television producer who is best known as the co-creator, in brackets with Jeremy Clarkson, and former executive producer of the Top Gear show from 2002 to 2015. Glad I got that right. As well as being the executive producer of the Grand Tour on Clarkson's farm. He was responsible for much of the show's style and humour, along with Jeremy Clarkson, Richard Hammond, and James May. He attended Repton boarding school along with Clarkson and Formula One designer Adrian Newey. There's also a bit in this book about he had a disease where his muscles and his nerves didn't quite connect with each other. So the age of 5, he spent a year in hospital, basically chained to a bed. So again, this is the stuff that's getting ignored in the 10-minute interviews on Chris Evans or Chris Moyles. There's actually the story of a human being behind all this in the book as well. Sorry, focus. After leaving school, Wilman was a member of a punk rock band, and apparently that was for about 3 weeks, worked in various jobs, and then he did American and Russian studies, I think at Kiel University. Wilman was persuaded by Clarkson to apply for a job at Auto Express, and then they sort of gradually merged together. I think that's it. Again, you've got to be careful if we're going to try and talk about the bloke in the context of the book, the human being behind the book. I don't want to go too much further into that.
Well,
Steve.
I remember seeing him actually presenting on Top Gear, because he did present on there. So he's not always been behind the camera. He was doing some of the reports.
And again, according to the book, that was only for the shortest of periods.
It was a short period.
And one of them, in fact, his peak was a film that he did when he went out to a nude car festival in the United States of America, and tells in some detail the story of, he realized he was going to have to be naked to present this, and all of his crew would have to be naked as well. But much like any of us in those days who have hairy backs, he was very conscious of the fact. And there's a great story in there about his wife advising him, you need to go 5 times to get this done. He went, no, I've got to leave tomorrow. I'm going to get it done now. And as somebody who's experienced that myself...
Have you?
Yeah, well, it's about 2004, and I was going on holiday with somebody who was very glamorous, who I fancied the hell out of. Went to Cuba. And I went, I can't go with my hairy back. So I went down to the local beauty salon. They hadn't had a male customer for years. And I said, look, can you just wax my back? And put it this way, it took so long that it got hit by inflation. The price went up while I was there. They brought in two. I had a team of 3 working on it by the end.
They give you a shopping bag full of it afterwards.
No. But what I did get, of course, what you expect is that you're going to like Action Man and have like a smooth, hairless back. What you actually get is a covering of red pussy welts.
Oh, I don't feel very well. Yeah.
Well, no. Yes, fortunately, the dual invention of the rashy top and now readily available clippers mean that I don't have that burden anymore. But are you a hairy man below the collar line, Steve?
It's a good name for a metal band, that Red Pussy Welts. Yeah, I mean, I must admit, at the weekend,
as long as you, no, it wouldn't be a good name because you'd have to write it down on the album cover.
Yeah, I mean, yes.
Which would read,
what? The album cover would read red. Yes.
How do you spell pussy?
Oh,
yeah.
Yes, do it. Maybe IE. Yes, maybe IE for that one. Anyway,
I never thought Bonnie Blue would get a mention on this podcast.
Well, who knew? This podcast is full of surprises, frankly. Yeah, she's on next week. Actually, she's promoting.
On whom? On you,
she's
not me.
Promoting her new book of spoken
I'm going to delete
psalms.
all of that.
Yes. So at the weekend, I got given, as part of a Secret Santa, a beard brush. I'll just hold it up to camera there so you can see it. So
okay, turn it around.
It is.
No, hold on.
It's a beard brush. Okay. If you want it, it's yours, mate. But basically,
I had one. No, they're really good.
Are they?
They've changed my life. Absolutely.
Okay. Well,
we're on to male grooming. People think we don't groom, but we do.
Of course we groom. Well, I said as a joke, I'll use it on my shoulders.
Yeah, but no. What it does is, you know how you're always very well presented and clean shaven. I often wonder if part of that is because a hairy face might irritate you. Why do you take the effort to make yourself look so bald and beautiful?
Well, a hairy face would irritate me, frankly. So just there won't be any mistletoe between us on when we do our Christmas recording.
But if you, so it all gets a bit itchy and a bit.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, claustrophobic. Yeah. Beard brush changes all that.
Really?
Yeah. You get a beard brush down. Admittedly, it will look like you've got beard druff on your t-shirt. It's like, but oh man, it's so liberating, and you feel clean and you'll love a beard brush, mate.
It is at this point that I can invoke, and I've been dying to do this for absolutely ages. I'm going to invoke some ASMR going on here. Here we go. This is the beard brush. This is the beard. This is the beard brush, right? Okay, just listen to that.
I can feel my beard getting unclogged.
There you go.
And as I
should
say,
be whispering.
Should
whisper at this point. There we go.
There you go.
Here we go.
Now do it on your face. Go on.
Happy Christmas.
Yeah. Have a little go.
All that is.
It's quite invigorating, isn't it?
That really is a new world. That is a new world.
Wow,
That's
I was
lovely.
worried we were going to get self-indulgent on the subject of Top Gear,
anyway,
but we've managed to.
It's got a brush off the dry skin. Right, okay. Anyway, so Andy Wilman's grooming adventure.
Yes.
So there we go. So that's Andy Wilman. Yeah, there. Go on, fire away.
Shall we have a clip? Let's refocus our minds. Have a clip, and then you can do your special bit where you read the blurb off the back of the book.
Okay.
Directors, producers, editors, researchers, production people, and camera crews. Because it's a very skilled and serious job to keep 3 middle-aged men 9 years old for over 2 decades. So I'll try and doff my cap to as many as I can. In truth, Jeremy should be the one writing this book. The old history is written by the victors moment should be his. because he was the tent pole that held the whole marquee up. For sure, we all played our parts, and we played them very well. But without his extraordinary brain and his drive, absolutely none of what we did would have happened.
I like that. What again, if we're going to talk about Andy Wilman, the producer, again, as we know, if you want to be a producer, the whole point is you've done your job well if nobody notices that you're there. I think he's the exception that proves the rule, because having been so successful for so long, when they moved to Amazon, we all knew that it wasn't the producers handing the envelopes with the task in. They referred to Mr. Wilman doing it, and he's an integral part of the show. But I just like that. It's going to come up again, that generosity of spirit of his. I think it's nice. I enjoyed his company as a human being for 11 and a half hours.
I agree with you, and I think it's additional to that is generosity of spirit, yes, but also he is laser focused. He knows what makes great TV, and he knows who makes great TV, and he also understands the whole repetition thing. If you follow all of the, as you and I have done in the course of swatting up for this show, if you follow all of his media appearances in the past couple of weeks, the stories are almost reproduced verbatim, which again some people would consider boring, but actually it's about discipline and structure and delivering that thing. So he's responsible for a good deal of the writing, and he says that his favourite place was, he found his mojo in the editing suite, where he would turn, get this, by the time they're doing the grand tour, they had 500 hours of film for every hour on the television. Wow. Yeah.
And look, when we're editing an hour of audio, generally, just as a guideline, you allow 4 hours to edit an hour of audio, but they've got 500 hours to watch, as well as edit the visuals, which is a more labour intensive process. He does actually admit at roughly that bit in the book that Penguin's accountants would have been happier if Jeremy Clarkson had written this book, and that perhaps the problem was with Clarkson is that he can't remember what he did. He says he hasn't got Alzheimer's or nothing, but he's so focused on the moment and the future and what comes next that he's not very good at recalling the past, which I thought was interesting. Interesting
insight into the man, isn't it? Yeah. Definitely. Shall we read out what this book's about?
I like it when you do this.
Okay, for if you've not picked up this book yet, this is what happens. Top Gear turned gloomy Sunday nights into celebratory Friday nights. It made household names of presenters Clarkson, Hammond and May, their unique chemistry and buddy movie antics proving irresistible to a vast global audience. With these three at the helm, Top Gear earned a place in the Guinness Book of Records as the most popular factual TV show on the planet. Then, a short while later, it was all gone. How did a thoroughly sensible little consumer advice program on cars turn into a global phenomenon in the first place, though? How did it all go wrong? And how did they rise from the ashes as the Grand Tour and go on to scale even greater heights? One man has all the answers. There, from the beginning, Top Gear and the Grand Tour co-creator and Jeremy's oldest friend, Andy Wilman, opens the bonnet on over 20 years of motoring mayhem. In Mr. Wilman's motoring adventure, the mysterious man in the shadows tells the inside story of your favourite TV shows for the first time. Irreverent, joyful, and as laugh-out-loud funny as the shows themselves, it's the best book about Top Gear and the Grand Tour in the world.
It's interesting, even in the Penguin blurb on the back of the book. Listening to you do that, I realise it's paragraph 5 before Andy Wilman's name is even mentioned.
Yes. But that's the producer for you, isn't it? You know?
Yeah,
Always,
exactly.
He's got to sell the show first. Just because it's the producer doing it, he's still playing the role of facilitator, basically, making it happen. He's got to sell the show. He's got to sell the book.
Yeah,
and even actually when he was talking about the openings to Top Gear, so there would be, sorry to interrupt there, Jeremy Clarkson would open the show over the theme tune saying, this week I do this, Richard does this, and James does this. Mm-hmm. And he started doing, I open a bag, Richard looks at a sky, and James ties up his shoelaces. And Andy Wilman was like, no, you've got to sell the show. You've got to sell the show. You've got to say, this is the latest XJS, this is the latest GTI, or whatever. But no, he was absolutely right, because it just brought you into that world of the show, didn't it? You know.
Look, I agree, and I think it would be foolhardy of you and me to say that hasn't influenced what we do to a certain extent. I mean, as I said last week in the run-up to this, we were here first. You and I were like this when we first met in 1999, 4 years before Top Gear came out. What Mr. Wilman does do, as far as I can see, is he has honed the chemistry. They always talk about the chemistry between the three presenters and how they have different presenting styles. That is the template for what makes me so excited about working with you. There is that slight special sauce in there where we're different enough and you know, we're getting better at having aggro, aren't we, as we go on. We're both gentle souls, but it's that kind of miraculous chemistry that makes me feel very lucky doing this with you, Steve.
Well, likewise, mate. And also, I think actually,
apart from the sincerity issue you've got, that
yes, I'll always consider you as someone I met.
Worked with.
That's a Red Dwarf going there. Now, the other thing about Andy Wilman is that when he talks about everything that they created together, it was no plan. It was complete accidents along the way, from the Stig to finding out they should do specials and all that sort of stuff. And I feel that is what we do as well. Everything we do is a nice happy accident, despite all including your meticulous planning and excellent production, by the way, mate. You are the sole producer here. You've got to stop attaching my name to it, dude.
But again, you know I walk in here knowing roughly how the thing's going to go.
Yeah.
And you hear the clips at the beginning, but I know what music and sound effects are going onto them at this point.
Yeah.
So I've got and look, as I say, all I do is mess about for 35-40 minutes of podcast. But just to run this enormous operation, and as I say, as he says himself, we were bright enough to take advantage of those accidents. And so, look, from a professional perspective, that to me, he and funnily enough, Nile Rodgers, who I once got to interview, the guy who from Chic, he considers himself a producer as well, and it's about that supporting and organising other people to help them sound good, or indeed in this case look good. And as far as I'm concerned, Top Gear, not only it's the gold standard. Not only was a subject matter I was interested in, it was actually technically how it was done. I geeked out not only on the cars and stuff, but I geeked out on how it was written and how it was presented.
Yes.
So yeah. Oh, right. Listen, I agree. The other thing that's happened. Here we go. We've done a lot of biographies type things. This is more a memoir than a biography, as discussed. And what's the difference? About 20 years. But what I really liked, and this is for you, Mr. Lionel Richie, and this runs through. We did Mr. Lionel Richie, or Lionel Ricky, as he referred to himself on Top Gear.
Ricky, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
The problem I had with Lionel Richie's book was the utter lack of contrition. So at one point he was, the head of a family of his life, and then suddenly, chapter 3, I was with my new wife by then, and there was lots of sparkle, but perhaps a little too much gloss, and not a enough looking at oneself in the mirror and being positive, which, as Mr. Wilman knows, that a story arc has to have a bit where stuff goes wrong or the lead character is flawed. And as we move now, and I'm going to ask for your opinion, to listen to what does the audiobook bring to the party. Here's a juicy little clip that just stood out for me.
On my side, the result was I'd be in the edit till 2 a.m, then in again at weekends. At home, Amanda was sitting at home eating dinners for one every night, having put 2 young ones to bed, and neither of us were able to enjoy 1 second of this huge noise, this success. I had become an absent father and a thoughtless husband who refused to see any point of view other than my own. I was chasing financial security to a manic degree, and on top of that, work was how I measured my self-worth to a tragic degree. Any offers of comfort or pleas for a saner working life from Amanda, I would reject in the most insensitive manner, because in my head, if I dropped the Top Gear ball for 1 second, everything would be over.
There's a lesson.
Yeah. But again, it's the ability to, driving Lamborghinis all over America. Yes, of course I enjoyed that part of this book, but I think that was the sentence that stood out to me. How did you find his narration, Steve?
Brilliant. Yeah, I really liked it. I thought he was very genuine, very heartfelt, especially that passage that you've just played. They fessed up. There's a lot of hindsight. There's a lot of reflection in there, about obviously the controversies surrounding Top Gear, some of the incidents, some of the remarks that were made during the show, the complaints. He was
there was a certain bit where it got too big for its own boots.
And he recognised that, didn't he? He recognised that.
In hindsight, yes, I think he did, but it got bloated, and you could see it happening in terms of. The interesting thing about Top Gear at the BBC for me, and you I hope as a fellow former BBC employee, is that they used to rail against the BBC quite a lot. They had a tight team, and there was a lot of joshing, but of course they were the most high-performing television production team in the world. And you know what it's like. You work stupid hours, and the thing that keeps you going is taking the mick out of your colleagues. Unfortunately, the other side to that coin is that it can get toxic. Similar success, there's a reverse side to the success coin, and that is, frankly, they're irresponsible and a bit too cocky at points. And what I always feared as they went from the BBC to the Grand Tour is there is a tradition at the BBC of railing against BBC management. I'm thinking of Terry Wogan talking about BBC hostility instead of hospitality when he was presenting radio in the 1980s, and how the BBC, who slowed him down, was crap, and almost that gave Top Gear a structure that I always felt that the Grand Tour didn't have. It was like the lunatics had started running the asylum. There was, as much as that sort of rebelling against management was funny with the BBC, I think it also gave them a structure that was lacking in the later work. Is that fair?
Well, yeah. And
did you watch the Grand Tour?
Yeah, absolutely. But he explains that in the book, though, doesn't he? He talks about how the BBC basically, and what he loved about the BBC working there, and that's why he defends it. That he defends the BBC quite a lot here. He's a critic, but I think a friendly critic, and he says that they left him alone. That the complaints department, the people who are doing the oversight on this, actually said it doesn't matter if you get complaints. It's that, can you defend them? And they always had their back. Amazon, and basically just let them get on with it. Amazon were completely different. There were lawyers about everything. They had to run stuff by Amazon the whole time, and so that's where if it was an edge, it might have been lost there. Can I just quickly go back to an earlier point though?
Yeah.
We were talking about him talking talking about his lack of a family life and being a distant family man from his nearest and dearest. And this is such a common trope with anything that goes absolutely massive. You've got to make things better than last week, better than the week before, or you've got to keep scaling the heights until when, question mark.
Yeah.
And it just reminds me of so many other, major names who look back in hindsight with regrets and are trying to sort of make amends for it now, but people never recognize it in the moment. David Letterman is another one that really sprang to mind when you played that clip when you were talking about it. And David Letterman was exactly the same thing. The show was everything. He didn't have a kid until much later in life, the family life and everything. And he realized then that actually it's not the most important thing in life. You have to enjoy your life as well. And, but that was just it's interesting to me. I think it happens to everyone. No, it's very easy to say you should recognize this when you're actually scaling the heights and rein it, wind your neck in or rein it in. But
love that expression.
I guess that's not human. It's not human nature, is it?
I've got some good news for you, Steve.
Yeah, go on.
Our absolute mediocrity will mean that our families and loved ones will never have to suffer.
Our family's going to get a lot of love.
They want us to go away.
Scaling the heights of a speed bump, that's us.
Look, before we end up in our own fundaments, I enjoyed spending time with Andy Wilman.
Yes.
As I say, it would have been better if Jeremy Clarkson had done it from most people's point of view.
Yeah, I don't think so. No, I don't agree.
You on this load of tut, we always say, is the compliment from us is if it's a narration or a performance. What did you feel?
Definite performance, yeah.
I felt it was, there were elements of performance in it and incredibly well written, and the fact that it was him delivering it almost added to it, and the sort of the humility that you recognise from the show, or the Top Gear or the Grand Tour, the self-deprecation stuff. That all came across very well. The man has clearly smoked even more Marlboro Reds than I have, which is heroic. So he's got a lovely voice, but a great presence, and just, as I say, more of a personal book than you would think. So a big thumbs up from me, Steve.
Yeah, big thumbs up from me too. I think definitely if motors are your jam, then this is a really great Christmas present to give someone and to receive as well, or just download it yourself, because it'll be some good car journeys over Christmas listening to this one. That was Mr. Willman's Motoring Adventure.
Do you know what? We don't talk about this on here, but I like the cover art as well. I bet the hardback book is a beautiful object, and I'm sure many men of indeterminate middle age like you and me will be opening a copy of this on Christmas morning. If you can't be bothered to think of what your dad, uncle, cousin, or indeed son wants for Christmas, and I think it is a very male book, and we have to be careful, then buy them this. It'll save you the bother of actually having to think of anything. The socks are frankly an insult. No
more slippers.
Get them this. At least it looks as though you've been thinking about them.
Yep, good idea. Yeah, absolutely. Yes, indeed, we are judging a book by its cover and also its content.
Good cover.
That was Mr. Wilman's Motoring Adventure with a great cover. Top Gear, Grand Tour, Clarkson and Me, by and read by Andy Wilman. 6th of November it came out, 11 hours, 4 minutes from Penguin Audio. Next week we have a quandary. We're at a fork in the road. Do we go fiction? Do we go fact? I suggest fiction here.
Okay, all right. So the two choices that I have put before you are the latest novel from that literature bloke Ian McEwan, which is called What We Can Know, and then there's 1929, the inside story of the greatest crash in Wall Street history. Have you read any Ian McEwan, Steve?
I've never read Ian McEwan. No, never.
Do you know what?
For my sins.
By the end I had 3 copies of Atonement. So what else? It was Endless Love. What's the other one he's done?
Well, that's a difficult one. I've never read any of his books, so I don't really...
Yeah, I read the one about the surgeon who lived in London, frankly, in Guy Ritchie's house. But it's hard, Steve. So I actually... I was daunted by the sheer heft of the Ian McEwan books that I'd acquired for myself. I felt I ought to read them.
Yeah.
And then I bottled it, as I say, to the extent that I had 2 or 3 copies of Atonement and was too frightened to read it. And then when I listened to it, it was very good, but quite hard.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so I'm not sure you're going to like that one, but the choice is yours. Or we can do the inside story of the greatest crash in Wall Street history.
Tricky one, that one. Should we toss a coin over it?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, should we do that?
Have you got coin?
I've got a coin.
I haven't got any coins.
I've got a coin right here.
I haven't touched a coin for about 3 months.
I've got the official Audiobook Club float here. I need some more float.
It's in a little metal box with a lock on the front, one of those with the little handle on the top.
That's right. Yeah, can I have some more float here, Doris?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, so heads for Ian McEwan, tails for 1929, the Wall Street crash. Okay, here we go. Heads for Ian McEwan. Here we go. Okay. It's tails. We're doing the Wall Street crash next week.
Oh, thank crap for that.
Next week's book, dear listener, is 1929, The Inside Story of the Greatest Crash in Wall Street History, by and read by Andrew Ross Sorkin. Came out middle of October, 13 hours, 30 minutes, again from Penguin Audio. That is next week's book. If you've been listening to that, tell us what you thought about. The hashtag is Audio Book Club. We are available wherever you get your podcast. Please subscribe. I keep sounding desperate about that whole thing. If you want to see, subscribe if you want to. We're pretty chill. We're on Facebook. Just search for Audio Book Club. Instagram, Blue Sky at Audiobook Show. YouTube, the channel is called Audiobook Club 1540. We're going to try and get some backstory to that number at the end there. But thank you for subscribing, by the way, into the thousands.
Do you know what I've just realised when you said that? 1540, of course. I thought it was a year. But in fact, it is a statement about where we are in life. If you think of it in terms of a tennis score, Steve, 1540, yes. It means our serve is about to get broken. And I reckon we live in a world where our serve is about to get broken.
Yep, that's it. That's brilliant. We'll have another tenuous link this time next week. Deuce. You can join us via audiobookclub.net, where you can also find all of our episodes. They're also up on YouTube as well. I've got some shorts on there too. But thank you for subscribing. We had lots of subscribers, lots of your comments as well on the Audiobook Club YouTube channel, which we're eternally grateful for. And keep them coming. So I think that about wraps it up for this week, Matt? We'll see you next week for a spot of 1929.
As you know, I don't like saying goodbye, but I was reminded on Saturday night when I was out, and I'm far too old to go out, of a way somebody, and this is really niche, Steve, I know you will get it, but it will be a very small subset of our listeners who get this.
Okay.
Keep them peeled.
Keep them peeled. So Police 5 if no one else gets it.
Sure, take
yes,
that.
Oh yes.
Oh, rinse it.
See you next time.
Audiobook Club with Steve Phillips and Matthew Layton.